Ahead. Hey there, John Lee. It's so nice to meet you today on the red couch. How are
Great to
you?
be here, Angie. Thank you very much for having me.
And I think this is the first time we're actually meeting and talking, even though, we've both been in the Erasmus University course as lecturers for a while,
Yes.
but we hadn't really interacted with each other yet. So I'm glad to get to know you better.
Well, likewise, I have to say the Erasmus course it's nice to give back to the community and to the next group of leaders that are coming through in global mobility. I'm a great admirer of all the work they're all doing and all the other fellow speakers. So, yes, it's a pleasure to get to meet.
And can you tell us a bit more about maybe some like fun fact about you, something people won't read on LinkedIn, anything
Yeah,
exciting?
Yeah, it's something that I don't have up there at the moment. Maybe one or two might have heard, but I speak six languages. I'm learning my seventh now at the moment. I speak four of them fluently, and I have a really deep love of the wonderful diversity that we have in the world. My previous startup called Culture Me that actually failed.
Uh-huh.
It was an intercultural platform in the unfortunately in the business travel industry during COVID. Learned a lot of difficult lessons during that, doing your first startup, coming from the corporate world, going into a startup. But I'm a really big believer in the power of different ideas, different perspectives, different cultures, different languages. And that's probably one of the reasons also I've managed to find myself in the mobility space.
Yeah, I guess loving different people from different cultures, loving languages, that indicates some passion. Have you always been like this? When did you find out that this is the world you want to be in?
Well, I do remember when I was like 9 years of age in primary school in Ireland and getting exposed to different languages like German and French. And my parents had taken me, once a year, twice a year, we might go on holidays if we were lucky, sometimes to, for example, Spain. And I used to love just seeing new places. I just got energized from seeing new places, new architecture, different foods, different languages. And I almost had a curiosity about how do you connect with people in these different languages. And probably an aha moment for me was when I was starting to learn these different languages. I thought to myself, well, what if you could really, get good at these languages and connect with people on a much deeper level? And that's kind of what I ended up doing later in my career. One example was when I was working in internal audit in CRH, very decentralized company. They sent us to all their subsidiaries around Europe.
Uh-huh.
And I'll never forget when I was visiting one of the manufacturing plants. I was the only person who could speak fluent German at that particular plant. And everyone else on the team, they all had translators. And for me, it was just magnificent to be able to really get to know what's going on, get to know the other people. And at the time, that person more or less said to me, here's all the challenges we're facing. And so I had an audit report about this long. I learned a lot about the business. My other colleagues, because they didn't understand the language as much, they found it a little bit harder. But I always enjoyed the ability to really connect with people across different cultures through the beauty of language today, nowadays, maybe will AI do a lot of it for us, who knows? But I still love the concept of trying hard to learn a language from scratch and connect with the locals.
And is that also why you do what you do, or is there a different motivation for being a startup founder now?
Yeah, it's I always had a motivation for becoming a founder. I was inspired by a lot of entrepreneurs who visited the university that I was studying in when I was in college, and they talked about the journey of becoming an entrepreneur, and I could see it was a very difficult journey, but it would be a very difficult journey, but that it was hugely rewarding. And for me, it was always something that I had a huge passion for. I always had an interest and a passion for business, particularly global business, and I just love the freedom, like having a blank canvas to try and come up with something brand new that hasn't been invented before, and then trying to bring that into a business that can touch millions of people. For me, there was always something awe-inspiring about that if you can do it.
Sounds amazing. And your company, Work From Anywhere, is a platform. You can tell us a bit more about that for, people who want to work from anywhere, I guess.
Yeah,
But I'm
so
also wondering, are you also working from anywhere, or how did you end up in Portugal?
yeah, in the last couple of years, we've lived in the Netherlands, spent 8 years living there, lived in Thailand, lived in Ireland during the pandemic, and moved to Portugal 3 years ago. So we're very much living the brand. I don't do as much digital nomad travels as I did in the past. I've now got
Yeah.
3 kids. Although having kids didn't stop me. My eldest daughter, Rosa, she's 8 years of age and she's been
Uh-huh.
to 26 countries. So that'll kind of give you an idea. But for me, yeah, I'm in this because this is a big part of my own identity. I had been a digital nomad pre-pandemic on and off. I'd seen the power of being able to work remotely for well over a decade. And so for me, transitioning into a business that was going to focus on that opportunity was something I just really embraced. At the time when the pandemic hit, probably the companies I spoke with, most of them were really unsure, had serious doubts whether offering international remote work as an employee benefit would be a thing. They just
Mm,
all instinctively felt the biggest challenge would be tax compliance. And so I kind of took that as a challenge and an opportunity. I said, well, what if you could design an algorithm, a platform, a technology platform that would allow you to approve workations, allow you to approve work from anywhere requests within 30 seconds. And well, that's basically what we built. We basically built a platform that allows you to do that in over 90 countries around the world to approve workation requests in a matter of seconds. And that's probably what's got us all the global awards that we won last year. But it's, for me, equally rewarding, if not more so, has been the fact that we're helping offer this as a benefit to millions of employees around the world.
yeah, yeah. It's pretty amazing. I mean, I saw you won 3 awards last year only, and you're the co-founder. But what do you know, or do you feel that there's like any change now, with the backlash against, coming back to the office, and, maybe some other like political discussions that are going on? Do you notice that there's a change in the, let's say, allowing more freedom to employees?
It's a good question, because if you look at it, we've seen it's like a
Yeah,
waves coming in and out. We've
yeah.
had waves of pushing back to office, and then waves that go back again. I mean, ultimately, if you look at the long-term trend of e-commerce as a percentage of total retail sales, it jumped up in the pandemic and went back to the long-term trend.
Mm-hmm.
Remote work has been different. It jumped up in the pandemic and it's very much stayed there. I do think there's a ferocious push right now by some companies and leaders to push return to office.
Mm-hmm.
Certainly this week, we could see that Amazon released their quarterly earnings.
Mm-hmm.
And it's no surprise to me, literally the quarter after they pushed full 5-day return to office, their earnings have been behind expectations. Now, there's a lot of reasons for that. It's not just return to office,
Mm-hmm.
but I think something we do see again and again is that the companies that are pushing for a full 5-day return to office, they are for sure going to lose out in the war for talent in the long run. And I think what you see is that really most companies have settled on some kind of a 2-3 day hybrid for domestic remote work. What is exciting though is for international remote work, offering that as an employee benefit, that's something that's still very early days, and a lot of companies are still trying to figure this out. But
Mm-hmm.
it's also something, certainly for us at Work From Anywhere, we're working with a lot of companies around the world to help them offer that as an enabler to be able to retain your best talent. And for some people, it's a hugely, hugely important employee benefit.
Mm. Yeah, I can see that. I mean, a few years ago, I said when I'm a grown up, I want to be a digital nomad. And now, I can technically do that. Like I could work from anywhere, but I also really love Zurich and being here. So I don't really take the whole freedom. Sometimes I just spend like a longer stretch, with my family in Germany, for example, and then I just work from there as a coach. It's totally possible. Um, what about, you see probably also people in our industry, we've been there for a while, you and I. Do you do you see, when if you were a younger version of yourself, or if you had a
Mhm.
more junior person, or maybe, like one of your nephews would ask you, what do I need to do to get into global mobility? What would you tell them to do?
I would say to think of the traditional architecture of jobs where you're in a job for 40 years with a pension,
Mm,
safety and security, and say that doesn't exist anymore and it's gone and hasn't existed for the last 5 years in a lot of companies. And in 10 years' time, what we're seeing, what we're going to continue to see is a continued atomization of job architecture and skills architecture, the fractionalization of jobs. And what do I mean by that? I mean that right now, today, when a company business unit says, I want these particular skills, the default mechanism amongst HR teams is to say, I want to put this job out for this job profile. 10 years from now, and Mercer have a lot of fascinating insights on job marketplaces, skills marketplaces, and the fractionalization of talent. But what I expect is going to see happen is that companies have their own data lakes and architectures of here are the people with the certain skills externally for certain things, and here are our own employees who have certain skills,
mhm.
and they'll have very much project-based approach. Here are the skills that we need for this particular project. Where do we need to source it from? And that sourcing it from can be a mixture of existing full-time employees in the company, or it can be fractional talent from all around the world for maybe for a matter of weeks or months. And think of a very practical example. Let's say a company needs to hire a specialist M&A expert, mergers and acquisition expert for a particular niche industry for a
Yeah.
3 month project.
Hmm.
In the past, companies would have gone probably either hired a consultancy or would have gone and hired somebody for a full-time job. In the future, we think, I suspect, the default will be, okay, have we got the skills internally? Okay, if we don't, then let's put out fractional independent contractor search and let's try and match for the skill set and what we're looking for and get that person on for 3 months. And so that gives much more flexibility. It's lower cost in the long term for companies, and it's giving you direct access to the skills you need. I think there's a hugely important role for global mobility to play a role there. Global mobility, talent acquisition, and that whole skills-based architecture. And then when you start layering on models like artificial intelligence, employers of record, independent contractors, but also the risks around those different models, it becomes very exciting for where global mobility can go and go much further than what they're doing today.
So what you're talking about is also sometimes referred to as the gig economy.
Yeah.
And in the past, I'm not sure, I don't think I hold this lecture anymore, but in the past, I had a lecture at Erasmus where, I would talk about the organizational design,
Mm.
and that we're moving from what I called the triangle of fear, which was the classical hierarchical management structure, to the flower of hope. Because in this gig kind of economy, people come together based on their skill set, and everybody's maybe a consultant or a freelancer or has their own business. And it's always been a bit of a vision where, I bought into from even when I still worked in HR, but I'm not sure many HR professionals actually believe in that model that much. So when you think about your lecture, for example, at Erasmus University or some other lectures, what do you notice? What do you think our HR colleagues and global mobility professionals might still have to understand and be taught more in these curricula?
Um, I suppose one constant thing for global mobility and in fact any function is the continual need to be adaptable and just continuous learning. I know it sounds so
Mm,
simple,
mm,
but the biggest observation is that the pace of change in
mm,
technology in the last year and a half alone has completely upended how we work.
mm,
And we're only just scratching the surface of it right now. And the only way to be able to prepare yourself to be able to manage that is to be able to be adaptable, multi-skilled, like not just a narrow silo like global mobility, but to be able to work across different types of skills, different types of projects, different types of functions, different types of countries. And I think certainly if I look at the long-term trend, being able to play a much more strategic role is a very, very obvious one. And
Mhm.
people say play a strategic role. It sounds, oh, that sounds very consultancy speak. I don't really get you. What do you mean by that, John? Well, what I mean by one simple example I'm very passionate about at the moment is that global mobility, especially during the pandemic and post-pandemic, and especially when it comes to policies like work from anywhere policies, global mobility has said, look, we want a place at the table. You want to implement and roll out a work from anywhere policy to the whole
Mhm.
employee population. We can play a role. We want to be part of that conversation. And what you've seen is kind of a mixture between two different types of leaders in mobility. You've had what you call tactical global mobility leaders that have said, no, I want to stay in my safe space. I don't feel comfortable. I prefer to be a follower in what's going on here.
Mhm.
And you've got those kind of leaders. But then you've got strategic leaders that have said, look, I can see something's going on here. I want to be ahead of where the curve is going to be in the next couple of years. And I want to upskill myself. I want to learn about where this space is going. It's funny, those kind of leaders have been the ones that have gotten more of a role at the C-suite, at the kind of executive table, to be able to influence the wider company for the better. And I think that's, if nothing else, global mobility, it's the very essence of what good global leaders can do. You can influence like tens of thousands of people in these big companies for the better and offer transformational benefits. I think one of the things I have observed is over the last year is a lot of those tactical global mobility functions have seen significant cost cutting, and either through the pressure to reduce costs or technology, whatever it might be, have seen a lot of roles being replaced or eliminated, which has been quite difficult because we've lost a lot of good talent in the industry. The other side of the coin is if we can take a function and say, well, how do we get a step, how do we get a place at the table, the C-suite, or at least a voice in those executive conversations? How do we do that? I think figuring that out collectively as a community, I think will be incredibly rewarding because I fundamentally believe global mobility has a hugely important role to play. But you need to have a strategic mindset. You need to know how you can get a seat at the table and how you can be more proactive. And again, it does come back to very much trying to be adaptable and trying to continuously learn, particularly when it comes to technology.
And strategic thinking is probably not something we've been teaching in the curriculum
Yeah, it is.
because we've been very compliance focused in the
You're
past.
correct, and tactical. So we've been very tactical
Yeah.
focused. And a very powerful example of this is Mercer did a spot survey on flexible work in October last year, I believe, and 96% of global mobility leaders do not measure the return on investment of their work from anywhere program. So if you think for a second, if you decide to go full return to the office or not offer work from anywhere program, that's absolutely fine. But if you don't measure the consequence of that, then you're going to be driving the bus blind. The other side of the coin, if you do decide to implement a work from anywhere policy and you don't measure the impact on retention, satisfaction, engagement, or cost, compliance costs and risk, if you're not measuring those things, then again, these are simple things that we can all do to start measuring the return on investment and the strategic impact of all our initiatives. So for me, I feel I kind of do get the sense in global mobility that we're so busy firefighting, we sometimes miss the wood from the trees. But I think trying to look at, and it's much bigger than work from anywhere, by the way. This is like, how do we measure the impact of our function on the business? How do we talk in the language of C-suite so that they'll recognize and treat the function as a strategic partner as opposed to being a tactical in the weeds player. And for me, I think that's probably something for me as an outsider from global mobility coming in. I came from a finance background, remember? So coming from finance background into mobility, I do see a lot of upside for where mobility can go, which is very exciting. And I think courses like Erasmus University absolutely has a role to play in that. And how can we become more strategic? I don't have all the answers, but I do know it's one of the big questions we need to start asking.
Yeah. No, I agree with you. And you already won 3 awards last year. I mean, what else is there to do in 2025 for your company? Do you have anything coming up, events, or anything you want to talk about?
Yeah, I am going to be. I'm going to be at the Mercer Talent Mobility Conference in Copenhagen in
Okay.
June.
Uh-huh.
That's when I'm going to be at. I do plan to. I'm being at a number of other events and conferences over the course of this year. I actually am running two roundtables in February, all about trying to figure out the ROI of work from anywhere. So there'll be some interesting insights on that. I probably will do a couple more of those over the course of this year. Literally, I launched that within a week. It was completely full. There was huge interest. So I'm trying to do what I can to try and offer resources, benchmarks, help, guidance, and knowledge sharing amongst the community to try and share some of these lessons that we're seeing amongst the companies that we help, but also the wider network of companies that we get to meet on these particular topics.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And how can people contact you if somebody now, sees this interview and they want to get in touch? Is LinkedIn a good place to contact you?
LinkedIn's a good place, I would say. They can follow Work From Anywhere on LinkedIn. That's where we have a lot of our announcements. They can also subscribe to our newsletter, so they can subscribe to that by visiting our website, wfa.team, that's TEAM. Or they can also email me directly as well, john@wfa.team, john@wfa.team, and I'm always more than happy to help the community.
Very good. Well, John, it was an honor to have you here, and I hope that we will meet in person at some stage at the Erasmus University when we do events again, which I'm really hoping for because I'm sort of a bit done with the digital now.
I hear
And
you.
then otherwise, maybe at a conference in the near future. Thank you so
Thanks so
much
much,
for
Andy.
being
Looking
here.
forward to it. Thank you so much, Andy. It was a pleasure being here with you.
Have a wonderful rest of the day. Bye bye.
Thank you.